So I think those things matter just because so here's the public so just
Yeah.
there's probably another 15 it's pretty compromise position.
Everybody has sort of gotten that distance. They are in committee, they're working through the issues. We'll see some bills start to come up next week. It's clear that the pace has been set as a quick pace. I think people are ready to work and try to make a concession.
One of the issues that you're going to talk about next week is the education bill that the word tweak is what everybody's been using. Is this a change that's going to be made, and is it really going to make a difference for school boards?
Well, I do think that it is going to make a difference for school boards. There are a couple of different competing visions about what should happen. Looks like the Senate is going to go for a full repeal of the thresholds, which means that schools will be able to spend what they want on a per-pupil basis with the current tax system in place. And the House is trying to find a balance, and we've been trying to. There's a significant number of people in the House who would like to do nothing at all, and then there is a significant group of people who would like to deal. And so the effort in the House has been about: is there some sort of middle ground by increasing the threshold to acknowledge that there were some unanticipated costs that went into school budgets on the healthcare side. So that's what the House is doing. I think it's still an open question where this will go.
Okay, but you don't have a lot of time.
No, but we'll have a bill up on the floor next week, and I think that the Senate will also have a bill on the floor next week. We have ongoing discussions, leadership level, at the chair level, to try to see if there's some sort of resolution that can find some middle ground. We don't have middle ground. We have some challenges around rule suspension. There's a group of people who don't want to do nothing at all, and they could really hold things up. So that's been part of why we've been trying to find some middle ground. And there is a desire among many taxpayers out there to have some mechanism in place to hold school spending.
When you say that people that don't want to do anything, that Republicans want to see this fail, or somebody else who is that?
No, I think it's both Republicans and Democrats, as well as independents who are willing to connect the thresholds that we put last year a time for work from their perspective. And so the balance that we're trying to find in the House is there some sort of middle ground that will allow us to keep the thresholds in place, but acknowledge that the number that was put in place last year didn't reflect this unanticipated spike in healthcare.
I guess we should describe to people these are increases that would be essentially capped.
That's right. Well, so that's actually not true. So what happens is if you spend over a certain percentage increase from your last year's per-pupil spending, anything you spend over that, you're going to have double taxation.
It's essentially a penalty.
It's a penalty. Yeah. It's not unlike a penalty that we already have.
What went wrong on this looking back?
Well, I'm not sure whether anything went wrong. It is clear that we didn't vet it in a way that made everybody feel that they got their say. So we had caps, we had caps in the House when it came out of the House, and the Senate didn't want to do anything.
So I don't hear you necessarily saying there was anything wrong with it. It may have been more how it was presented.
So my view is that we need to have some mechanism that recognizes that we can't have unlimited growth. And whether this was the mechanism to do that, I think is an open question. But we hear competing goals from the constituencies. One is we'd like to be able to spend enough money to give our kids a good education, but we also want to moderate the growth in education spending given the fact that we have declining enrollments. And so the effort was really meant to find
next week to lay out his budget. I spoke with the budget creator, Amy Polito, this morning, so not really a big surprise. What do you hear and what do you anticipate?
I haven't seen any details. The information that I've gotten has been very high level. Suggests to me that they'll be able to close the gap and that there won't be things that will be yet on arrival, at least from what I've heard so far now. There's a week to go, and you don't know what creeps in or creeps out in the next week, so we'll see what happens.
One of the issues that came up this week was this, or I guess end of last week, was this question about Global Foundries getting $1 million in the enterprise fund. Good idea? Bad idea?
Well, the money that we put in the enterprise fund was specifically meant to help IBM or its successor when the enterprise fund was adopted. So the monies that were appropriated were consistent with the purpose of the fund in the first place. What is interesting to me is a year and a half makes a huge difference. If we were in the same place that we were a year and a half ago, where IBM still owned the plant and there were stories about consistent possibilities of layoffs, you would have probably most of the people here say we can't lose this employer. We need to put $1 million because $1 million is a small amount of money when you think about what the cost would be to lose those jobs. And we're still in a competitive environment with Global Foundries. There are rumors out there that plant is for sale. And so it still is a plant that is vital to the economy of the state of Vermont. And it's important for us to have that plant to be successful economically. I think that given why we adopted the fund in the first place and the importance of the employer, that particular appropriation was the right call.
They're investing something to the tune of $72 million. Yep. This is $1 million. How is it meaningful?
Well, I think you'd have to ask them how it's meaningful.
How do you think it's meaningful?
I think it's meaningful because I think it's a signal to the company that we will be a partner with them in trying to ensure that they have the capacity to build out that and maintain that plant. I can tell you, as somebody who went behind the windows for a plant tour this past fall, that place is an incredible asset for the state of Vermont. And they are taking technology that is decades old and refining it to continue to produce high-end chips. And I think we ought to partner with them because that facility is incredibly important for us. And they need, when you talk to them, what they need is help with people and they need help with investments. And so to the extent that we can partner with them, with the largest private employer in the state of Vermont to ensure their continuing vitality, I'm going to continue to work to help that happen.
Mm-hmm. You call it a signal.
I do think it's a signal, yeah. And if we were going to design something for a going forward basis, we might design something very different than what we had for the enterprise to start with, an enterprise fund that we started with. But we have what we have. It was adopted for a specific purpose. And I think that the monies that were spent were appropriate given that that was the purpose that they were allocated for in the first place.
Do you want to see it replenished?
I would like to see something with tighter controls if we were going to do anything in the future. I think that we need to have some assurances from the employers about what they're going to do with the money, and recapture if they decide to leave or they decide to lower employment.
Mm-hmm. And you don't think that's in there as it stands?
I don't think it is, and I think I think that was a lot of the criticism of the appropriation. And so, I think that we need in the future to have some more rigor around the application and allocation process.
Mm-hmm. You and I talked a couple of weeks ago, and you talked about places like Springfield and maybe trying to give them a boost, turn them into, technology center or whatever. Tell me more. Have you thought any more about that?
So, I have been thinking about it. Springfield would be a perfect place for us to have some sort of advanced manufacturing processes. It's got huge amount of space, industrial space. It's got great telecommunications infrastructure. I would like to see us trying to find companies that are growing in Vermont and need additional space, get in there so that they have the opportunity to grow in Vermont rather than grow somewhere else.
So are you is there a piece of legislation? How do you advance that idea in here?
Well, I mean, so I think that the way that we advance that idea is if there are companies that need help with workforce training or need help with, say, brownfield rehabilitation, where there is not currently legislation that will allow them to do that, I think that's where we can be helpful. I do think in the first instance, this is a job for the administration and the local economic development corporations to work to find the companies that would be appropriate for Springfield and appropriate to grow there.
Let's talk about this marijuana legislation. Last week, the governor said in his State of the State address he could be supportive of it under a number of conditions. You said sort of the same thing, that if certain conditions were met, including my recollection, he said last week, getting rid of the black market. I mean, is the bar? I mean, is that a ridiculous expectation?
So I don't know how you define getting rid of the black market, and I think it's hard to know whether you'll get rid of the black market by legalizing marijuana. So that's a pretty fuzzy goal to meet in passing the legislation. I do think that it is part of why people want to pass that legislation. Whether you can measure if that's happening, I think is important.
Okay. So what are the criteria for you? What are the hurdles that you want to see?
So, I mean, the primary hurdles for me have always been about public safety on the roads. They have been about making sure that we have a system that does not increase the use of marijuana among our young people, and to the extent possible could reduce it. So regulate public health information and try to put programs in place that could reduce the use of marijuana. We have seen that with some of the tobacco control programs. We had a higher rate of youth smoking before we put significant money into programs to help reduce teen smoking. So we've seen the possibility. The question is whether we can do it. The other thing is the money really needs to be almost entirely for public health purposes. So I want to see how the money is going to unfold. And there are other issues. I just think that this is so complicated. To see it happen in the next 14 weeks is, I think, unlikely. I'm not saying it's not going to happen. I think it's hard to see how everything's going to unfold, particularly with a fair amount of resistance within the House of Representatives.
There just seems to be a lot of, there's a big push. I mean, there seems to be a lot of lobbying activity, and is this unusual?
No.
How much of a push?
No, it's not unusual. Frankly, it's not surprising. But, the thing is that if you can't answer the questions that have been asked, it doesn't matter how much lobbying you're doing, it's not going to get across the finish line. So I've been very clear with the advocates what they need to do to meet the needs of various legislators. And even if they do, frankly, it's not clear to me that the count is there to pass this year.
Senator Campbell said to me that he thought trying to pass marijuana legislation sent a bad message given the opiate addiction problem. Do you see that connection and share that concern?
I think that there is a challenge around that particular issue, that people see what they believe to be inconsistent messages. That said, marijuana is very different from heroin or crack cocaine or anything like that. Those drugs are highly addictive and have different consequences to people than marijuana. And I think that trying to put those two together, heroin and marijuana, really is an apples and oranges comparison that's not appropriate.
Last question. A lot of people feel as though state spending has been higher than it should be, given the revenues, given the economy, given everything else. Is that a fair critique?
Well, I do think that over the last couple of years, the efforts in the House and I think the Senate and the administration has been about trying to bring revenues and revenue growth and spending growth on the same trend line. And my goal is that we get as close to having same revenue trend line and spending trend line as possible, so that for the future we're on a sustainable path.
Okay, what does that mean?
What does it mean? It means actually having our spending trend be consistent with the revenue trend, and that probably means saying, well, we're not going to do some things, or we're going to change the way we're going to do things to not spend as much money.
Okay, not another challenges for change or anything like that, though, right? Or
No, but I think that what we really need to do is we need to evaluate state programs and find out what is working successfully and what's not. And what the House has been doing over the last week and a half has been having policy committees look at the programs within their jurisdiction to evaluate how they're doing and give them enough information to allow them to prioritize the programs within their jurisdiction to help them in making recommendations to the administration.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks.
Thanks. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
That was great. That was great.
Yeah, it's good.
You were anticipating all this.
Do you expect any less?
No, I don't, actually. Wow, so